home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Tonight on Farage, we'll debate, should the civil service get back to the office? This in the light of a whistleblower saying at the time of the fall of Kabul, there was basically no one there, which led to the mess being even worse than it should be. The centre of gravity in French politics is shifting to the right. Just how influential is Eric Zemmour? And joining me on Talking Pints, the black farmer, Wilfred Emmanuel-Jones.
Hello, I'm Simon Pusey. These are your latest news headlines. Yellow weather warnings for wind and snow are in place across almost all of the country as Storm Barra hits. Winds of almost 70 miles per hour have been recorded off the southwest coast of England. The storm has also caused flooding in southwest Ireland. In western Scotland and northwest England, drivers have been warned of potentially hazardous conditions. Prime Minister Boris Johnson is warning the new COVID variant Omicron is more transmissible than the Delta strain. It comes as 101 new Omicron cases have been confirmed in the UK, taking the total to 437. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon is encouraging people in Scotland to work from home, as cases there have risen by 11% in just the past week. The Foreign Office's top civil servant has admitted he took a 17-day holiday during the UK's evacuation effort in Afghanistan. Speaking at a Select Committee hearing, Sir Philip Barton acknowledged it was a mistake for him to have remained on holiday 11 days after Kabul fell to Taliban control, while at the same time former Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab was also on holiday. This comes as a Whitehall whistleblower, Raphael Marshall, accused the government of failing to act and costing lives. He claims the UK airlifted just 5% of Afghans who asked for help.
I have reflected a lot since August on my leave, and if I had my time again, I would have come back from my leave earlier. When I went on leave, including on the 9th, there was no inevitability at that point that Kabul was going to fall in the period that it fell in.
One of the suspects thought to be involved in the killing of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi has been arrested in France. Mr. Khashoggi was killed in 2018 after entering the Saudi Arabian embassy in Turkey. He had previously been critical of Saudi officials. Police detained a man at an airport near Paris as he was about to board a flight to Riyadh. Airport-style security is going to be installed in all new prisons as part of a government crackdown on drugs. The zero-tolerance approach in England and Wales will see body scanners, biometric identification and sniffer dogs used on both visitors and staff to try and keep dangerous substances out of jails. And prisoners will be assessed on arrival for drug and alcohol addiction. That's your news update. Let's get back to Farage.
Good evening. Well, the pandemic has been used to encourage us all to work from home. A new way of working, home working, flexible working, and we're all going to be just as productive as we were when we went to the office and worked in teams. I've always thought the whole thing is a complete load of nonsense in the vast majority of cases, but it's something that's been embraced by the civil service. Yes, absolutely. The last estimate is that only 20% of civil servants are back in their London offices. And indeed, a survey conducted a few months ago into the Civil Service Union discovered that 7 out of 10 civil service officials want their post-pandemic working to include 3 days a week from home and just twice in the office. Well, I think a symptom of this has been exposed by Raphael Marshall, the whistleblower, who spoke to the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, and he talked about the withdrawal from Afghanistan, saying that at times he was the sole person in the office dealing with the Afghan inbox. And these are people, and I'm not sure, that every single person that said they wanted to come to the UK was genuine, but there were many thousands of people during those 20 years that did work for the British forces whose lives were directly under threat by the takeover of Kabul by the Taliban. Worse still with this culture, Sir Philip Barton, the boss. And here's a picture of him, a classic sort of chinless wonder who's had a wonderful career in the civil service. He, of course, has already got his knighthood, his guaranteed pension. Think about this. He was the senior civil servant there in the Foreign Office. Kabul fell on the 15th of August with all of the ensuing chaos. And guess when he came back to work? Well, he came back to work on the 26th of August. Jolly well done, Sir Philip. Absolutely marvellous. No, I think the whole thing is a complete and utter disgrace. There are other questions too. Pen Farthing, who managed to evacuate 150 dogs. And it said by the whistleblower that this was a priority for Boris Johnson. Well, look, we all love dogs, but I don't think that was specifically one of our war aims. Even worse than that, in the Foreign Office in Kabul, details of Afghanis, their addresses, were left in the British Embassy and were not destroyed. So the question tonight I want to debate with you is, should the civil service get back to the office? I'd love your views on this. Maybe I've got this wrong. Maybe home working is the future. Tell me what you think. Please, GBViews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet at GBNews. Now, all of this was put to the Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, this morning, who responded thus.
Did not put the welfare of animals above individuals, and I think you can see that in the facts of 15,000 people evacuated in just 2 weeks. As I said, biggest effort operation in living memory, and only the US got more out. Look, I think it's an incredibly difficult situation. We would have wanted a longer time window in order to get out everyone who was eligible. But even after the evacuation, I saw this for myself, we were working to get flights out of Kabul with Qatar. We were working with regional partners to make sure that we could take British nationals and those that we had said that we would take. We did everything we could. And again, I say, come back to the point, 15,000 people evacuated in 2 weeks. Never been done before, certainly not in my living memory, and only the United States got more people out. I think that was actually a record that those involved, particularly those working on the ground, should be proud of. We always said that we were up against this timeline, that a combination of the US deadline and the Taliban's approach to it, that we were working to an expedited deadline. And look, that put pressure on the evacuation plan. But we'd been planning for this since well before, since January, and indeed again in April. We changed the travel advice. Those schemes like the AMP scheme were being set up. But of course, if we'd have had extra time, we would have prolonged that period.
So there's the official response, the establishment closing ranks, saying everything's absolutely fine. We managed to get 15,000 people out. The whistleblower, well, Raphael was saying that basically thousands of emails weren't even read. Now, as I said earlier, I'm sure anyone wanted to get out of Kabul, and many of those may not have been genuine. But did we actually get the right 15,000 people out? And what is the culture there within the Foreign Office. Well, joining me is somebody with real experience of dealing with the Foreign Office and of Afghanistan. It's Colonel Richard Kemp, retired Army officer who was commander of some British forces in Afghanistan way back in 2003. Colonel Kemp, good evening.
Good evening. A long time ago.
It was a long time ago, but at the end of that 20 years, and of course, you went there to get rid of the Taliban. At the end of the 20 years, Joe Biden pulls the plug, and by the way, far more blame lies with him for what happened than it does with the Foreign Office. I do want to make that clear. But what did you make of what the whistleblower had to say about the culture, the work from home culture, and the fact that the head of the operation, the head of the office, decided not to come back from his holiday until 11 days after Kabul had fallen?
Well, I'm afraid to say that culture rings very, very true with me. I worked in the Cabinet Office for many years, and I worked with all the Whitehall government departments, including the Foreign Office. When we had crises to deal with, and we had several crises during my tenure, not on this scale, but nevertheless significant crises, it was always very difficult to get Whitehall departments, including the Foreign Office, to step up to the mark. Yes, there were some very, very effective people there, very clever people, very hard-working people, some who work right around the clock. But the culture was not to work 24/7 and keep working till the job's done. It was to work, to have your holiday, to finish your scheduled hours, and to, not to kind of take the military ethos, which is just do it till the job's finished. And I'm afraid it was very hard to whip government officials working in Whitehall into line and try and get them to understand the need to go onto a war footing when actually you've got a wartime situation. So it doesn't surprise me that this is the case still in the Foreign Office today. And as to working from home, I mean, you can't run a crisis in any circumstances working from home. You've got to be in the same place, either in the same room or the same complex. You cannot do it. Just the idea of working from home, running a major crisis like this is just laughable if it wasn't so tragic. And as to the leadership of the Foreign Office, the minute this began to evolve, the permanent secretary of the Foreign Office should have been straight back at work, back behind his desk. How can he expect people to put all the effort in to go the extra mile that is demanded by this situation if he's lying on a beach somewhere?
Well, I must say, his defence that I kept in touch with the office wasn't very convincing to me either. I've certainly had to cancel holidays to come back for business reasons, political reasons. I'm astonished that he decided that 11 days was actually okay. And backing up your point about, a war room situation and you work until the job is done, in fact, they worked 8-hour revolving shifts during that period, whether at home or in the office, because they didn't want staff to burn out. Well, there you are. Other question for you, Richard Kemp. I don't know are you a dog owner?
I'm not a dog owner, no, and I certainly don't think that any priority should have been given to dogs over human beings in Afghanistan. I don't care what the Prime Minister or his wife may have thought or what the British public thought. The procedures and the conditions that were laid down by the Foreign Office for evacuating did not include dogs and should not have included dogs.
No, I mean, look, it was a private plane that took the dogs out, but the argument is that army resources were diverted in helping shelter get them to the aeroplane. So there is a real question around that. And Richard Kemp, finally, the last figures I've got are that 20% of the civil service are back at their desks in London, and that the Civil Service Union themselves, 7 out of 10 of their senior people think that here on forever, they should only have to come to the London office 2 days a week. Do we need a very major change of culture, perhaps not just in the Foreign Office, but perhaps that goes through the Ministry of Defence, again, who you've got experience with? Does someone need to shake this whole thing up?
Somebody does need to shake it up. It's a very, very deeply ingrained culture. And I think things like this, we've heard from the whistleblower, Mr. Marshall, the emphasis on work-life balance. We don't want emphasis on work-life balance. We want emphasis on getting the job done. And if that needs working, if necessary, for 12 hours a day or 15 hours a day, whatever it is, then they should do that. The Army was called in to help the Foreign Office because they know soldiers will work the hours they're required to work. It does need shaking up. We don't want people working from home. We don't want virtue signalling about work-life balance. We need people behind their desks doing their job. And the only place that most civil servants can actually do their job, in my view, and I've had a lot of experience of working with civil servants, is behind their desks and getting out sometimes on the ground to see how things are going on the ground as well.
Well, Colonel Kemp, thank you for joining us this evening and giving us your very clear opinion. Well, to you at home, as I say, it could well be that Colonel Kemp and I are just old-fashioned, completely out of touch, but I think the argument that he made there's a compelling one. In a crisis, you need people working together in a high-pressure situation, able to bounce ideas off each other, and I'm absolutely convinced that is how this should have been handled. I'm utterly astonished at the laxitude of much of what went on, and frankly, weak apologies coming afterwards simply aren't good enough. And I never thought I'd say this, but I've always found Dominic Cummings to be a very difficult individual. But one thing he was absolutely right about was the blob, as he described it, the Westminster set that run so much of our policy, so much of our politics, and there's no doubt that Cummings really did want a major shake-up of the civil service. And I worry, with him gone from Downing Street, I worry where that impetus may come from, if at all. Now, the weather. The Brits, of course, always like talking about the weather. Storm Arwen is now 11 days ago, and there are still many hundreds of homes up in the northeast of England without electricity. But today, Northern Ireland, North Wales, the west of Scotland have been hit by Storm Barra, and there is a weather map showing you that the isobars there are really very, very tight. Indeed, I did listen to the shipping forecast at 5:20 this morning, I think it was, and I heard hurricane-force winds predicted for parts of the sea. So I knew this was going to be a big one, and perhaps even a very dangerous one. So joining me is Mark White, GB News' Home and Security Editor, who, at the drop of a hat, heads off to cover any crisis that's going on. Mark, good evening.
Nigel, good evening. I suppose there will be quite a few viewers who are scratching their heads saying, a winter storm in the middle of winter, go figure, why on earth are they covering that? But I think it's important actually to come up and cover these storms, because we often get complaints, I think justifiably, from many people in the north of England, in Scotland, and let's face it, other parts of the country outside of London and the southeast, who say that you're only ever, as the media, interested in doing these storms when it affects the southeast, and the slightest flurry and everything grinds to a halt. Well, here, of course, they just, as best they can, get on with it, and that's what they did today as Storm Barra barreled in first to the west coast of Ireland, then to the UK, and it's still about, and we're expecting it to still be a point of concern over at least the next 12, perhaps 24 hours as it continues to circulate round. Now, it was bad here on the main A7, which is a trunk road between Carlisle and Edinburgh that runs right through the Scottish borders. It was bad in some other areas, high-lying routes mainly. Just a couple of clips to play you actually, just to show you what it was like a little earlier today of me here on the A7 and my colleague Davy Donaldson up in the Southern Highlands. We're in the heart of the Scottish borders on the A7 trunk route between Carlisle and Edinburgh, and Storm Barra has arrived. It's snowing pretty heavily now, and the added hazard are the winds, which are really whipping up now and likely to cause significant drifting on the higher routes.
Well, as you can see here at Aviemore, Storm Barra has really taken a hold, because heavy snow in the area. Number of cars here parked behind me. Doesn't look like they're going to be going anywhere soon at all. You can also see a bus as well in the background, and it's had real trouble actually trying to get out of the snow. So it's really starting to take a grip here. We're expecting anywhere between 2 to 4 inches of snow. I suggest we've certainly had some of that already, and it's not going to snow. The forecast says it's not going to snow. It's going to continue to snow for some time, so that's going to go right through the night. So yeah, the snow gates up at the Cairngorm Centre further up the road, they've been closed, so that's been closed off completely. And little wonder when you see the conditions here, because it really is getting quite treacherous. We made our way up here a short time ago, and the snow was getting worse and worse, so we'll certainly be taking an about turn and heading back down the hill and back to sort of better conditions. But it's the same in Aviemore, it's the same further down. Dalwhinnie's quite bad as well, and generally across Scotland we're expecting, there's obviously a number of warnings in place, and we're expecting gusts of 70 to 80 miles an hour, and obviously, as I said, more and more snow in some areas. 17 centimetres of snow forecast, so certainly Storm Barra very much taking a hold.
And reports that I got, Mark, that in the Republic of Ireland and across into Northern Ireland, something like 50,000 houses had lost electricity.
Yeah, and I'll bet that the good people of the Irish Republic will not be going 11 days without their homes being reconnected. Whatever Northern Power Grid say about the exceptional circumstances of Storm Arwen, I cannot believe for the life of me that if this had been an event that was taking place in the southeast of England, that people would still be without power some 11 days on. We were told yesterday by the politicians that the 1,300 remaining households, and that's households, remember, with sometimes multiple people in one household, the 1,300 remaining households would have their power restored today. Well, the end of today is here pretty much, and we still have 500 homes still without power going into a 12th day.
Mark, thank you very much. Great reporting. And I think the point Mark makes there, that if this was in the southeast of England, this would have been dealt with very much more quickly, and that actually mainstream media are guilty, perhaps not always, of covering things that happen outside of London and the southeast in the way in which they should. Let's see what happens in the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, and hope they get put back online more quickly than those poor people in the northeast. Just occasionally, a politician comes along who shifts the centre of gravity of political debate in a nation. I have a feeling that's happening in France right now with Eric Zemmour. In a moment, we'll go to Paris to discuss this with somebody that knows him well.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. The worst of Storm Barra's weather is now easing, but the weather stays unsettled during the next 24 hours with further rain or showers and continued gusty winds in many places. You can see Storm Barra, a dartboard area of low pressure, which deepened rapidly as it made its way across the Atlantic on Monday and the start of Tuesday. Now slowing down and gradually filling, so the worst of its impacts will come down in the next 24 hours, but still the potential for some very unsettled weather overnight. Through the evening, 70 to 80 mile per hour wind gusts possible for parts of Wales and to the Bristol Channel as well. Stays windy in the northeast as well, and showers wrapped around that area of low pressure, or longer spells of rain with further hill snow for northern England as well as Scotland. So we start off Wednesday very unsettled with that low still in place. The winds will be coming down through the day, but it's going to take a while, so still the potential for gales for South Wales and South West England, 65 mile per hour wind gusts. And for northeast Scotland, Northern Ireland, parts of Western England and Wales, a continuous feed of showers through the day. The weather stays unsettled in many spots. Some drier and brighter interludes towards the east of England, Western Scotland, for example. However, all in all, it's an unsettled day. Expect showers, expect gusty winds, and it will feel cool or cold with all of that weather going on. Into Wednesday evening and overnight, we're going to see further showers coming in from that area of low pressure, especially in the east and northeast, and a few coming through to Western England, Wales and Northern Ireland. A lot of cloud cover, and with that breeze, temperatures generally holding up overnight, but potential for a chilly start for Western Scotland, perhaps one or two spots further south as well. A bright start in these areas, a better chance of sunshine coming through on Thursday morning, and showers gradually easing through the day in many spots, but further rain arrives in the far west west. Towards the end of Thursday, that makes its way across the country on Friday, followed by showers. More rain to come on Saturday.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
On Brazier at 8, swimming legend Sharon Davis joins me to talk about who wins and loses when a nation boycotts the Olympics. As the Pope compares the EU to a totalitarian regime, why is the Vatican struggling to forgive Brussels? Also, Frank Furedi on why lives were lost in Kabul because Foreign Office civil servants were working from home. All that plus the wonderful side effects of Viagra. That's Brazier from 8.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Some audience reactions. Steve, via GB News, says, Nigel, let them have 5 days a week at home. Sack the lot. Do we really need them? Well, I guess someone's got to run, the structure of the country. Ian asks, what a cushy job that civil servants have. A job for life, a gold-plated pension, and working from home. It's a disgrace. George, on GB Views, says, if only 20% of civil servants have returned to work, perhaps we only need 20% of the current number. Well, you may be right. I'm sure Dominic Cummings would have had a view on that. Muriel says, let's just fire all the civil servants. And somebody on Twitter says, I've worked from home for over 3 years as a telecoms network engineer and actually worked harder because I didn't want to lose the privilege. I'm not a civil servant. I don't doubt that there are some people, perhaps computer programmers, who may find working from home there are fewer distractions than being in the office. For the vast majority of us, I think working from home leads to constant distractions and actually our productivity going down. Plus, the work from home culture is so unfair on young people embarking on careers who are ambitious and want to get on because they learn by being with older, experienced people. I find the best ideas come when you're with people, bouncing ideas off them. And that could be in the office. It could be in the pub on Thursday night after work. I think being with other people leads to more productivity and fresh thinking. That is my view. I haven't shifted from it, though I accept that for some, working from home works. Now, Monsieur Zemmour is changing French politics in a remarkable way. The country is moving in its language to the right and doing so pretty significantly. Zemmour, never involved before in politics, and here he is at a big rally at the weekend shortly after he announced that he was throwing his hat in the ring to run as French president. Just how influential is he? Just how big a difference is he making? Well, joining me is Peter Allen, journalist based in Paris, old friend of mine. And you've recently interviewed Zemmour, but you've known him for a bit, I believe.
I have, Nigel. He's effectively a Paris hack. He's somebody who's been on the journalistic scene in Paris for many, many years, not just as a broadcaster, but also as a print journalist. That's how he started out. Very much a dissenting, angry, dare I say, bitter print journalist. I mean these in a complimentary way, actually, not in a kind of, he's a piece of work and he's always being unpleasant to people. He is somebody who's always trying to pick out the negative in what he sees as a corrupt political establishment in Paris, a political establishment that doesn't really deliver to the people of France. And he makes those views known, often very eloquently. The problem with him, many would argue, is his abject extremism in one particular area, Nigel, and that would be immigration and his views towards millions of French citizens who he rather objects to their presence in France for cultural, for religious, for all kinds of reasons. And this is something that has made him very, very unpopular with other large segments of French society. But again, Nigel, to sum him up, he's a hack journalist who has been taking pot shots at the French political establishment for many, many years. And now he's pushing himself forward as somebody who can be the head of state, the president of the French Republic, a hugely powerful position. You don't necessarily need an established party behind you, as Emmanuel Macron displayed in 2017. But I can tell you that Eric Zemmour has just announced that he is founding a new party, and the name is Reconquest. What a warlike name that is. Wow. for a party, Nigel.
Yes, it is. I suppose he would argue that he's not complaining about immigration, but integration. But we'll have to find out more on that as time goes on. And yet, it seems to me, observing from here, listening to the rhetoric, even of Monsieur Barnier, who attempted to get the nomination for his party but failed, it seems he's shifting the whole debate in France very much in his direction when it comes to immigration, when it comes to integration. I mean, France is moving to the right because of this man, isn't it?
We could argue that. Marine Le Pen might disagree. The Rassemblement National came second in the last presidential election in 2017. She always gets a very large segment of the vote. She would argue that this is her chance now coming up. At the moment, I have to say, Nigel, she's slightly ahead of him in the polls. And of course, they're both very angry with each other because they think that they will split the far-right vote, if I'm allowed to use that expression. He thinks and she thinks that the two of them, there isn't a place for both of them in this presidential election. And the winners won't necessarily be Macron, but the Gaullist Conservatives, who, you're completely right there, Nigel, are moving massively to the right as well. Yeah. Emmanuel Macron himself even has brought in a lot of policies that a lot of his more liberal supporters wouldn't support. And that is something that is absolutely right. France has always been a relatively large right-wing contingent, as you know, but certainly I would say that somebody like Eric Zemmour is certainly pushing the debate further and further to the right.
Well, I remember when a guy called Donald Trump, who was a real estate guy from New York, who had a TV show in America, threw his hat into the ring and made some incredibly bold statements on issues. And everybody said, well, this will never get anywhere. And hey, he came through and won. So I'm not saying Zemmour will, but I do think, just finally, France is not a very happy place, is it? Its citizens don't feel very happy. Its cities feel very divided. The economy is now starting to bite. If ever there was a moment for a shock in modern times, it is now, isn't it?
Potentially. I mean, Saturdays now, for example, is almost an institutionalized riot day. Paris has always been a protest city. There have always been riots in Paris, as we all know. But there is a feeling that this organised dissent, this idea that thousands, millions on certain weekends can come out on the street in cities all over France and protest, often very violently, against the administration, Emmanuel Macron's administration. Yes, there is division. There are people who are very upset. The economy is not doing that badly. Unemployment is falling. There are certain things that the government is doing right. But you're right, Nigel. There's unhappiness. There are problems. There's certainly institutionalized problems with the French system. And that is what somebody like Eric Zemmour hopes he can do something about if he were cause this incredible surprise.
Well, Peter, thank you for joining us, and we're going to talk to you again as the next few months go by. Thank you very much indeed. Now, Pope Francis, well, he's compared the EU to a Nazi dictatorship for trying to impose woke rules and language by banning the use of the word Christmas. Yes, last week the European Union wanted to cancel Christmas after telling staff to avoid the festive word in favour of holiday period because it could be offensive to non-Christians. The Pope not happy with this at all, and he's warned the bloc not to take the path of ideological colonialisation as he returned from Greece after a 4-day trip. This Pope has form, I can tell you. He came to visit the European Parliament in 2014 when I was one of the 7 group leaders, and we all stood in the entrance to the European Parliament with the flags. Now, this is the official photograph, and it shows the Pope ignoring me completely. The fact is, the Pope did speak to me, but the official photographs decided that I would be a non-person for the purposes of this event. Luckily, a friend in the gallery did actually take some other pictures which show us saying hello and chatting. They were furious with him because Francis spent longer talking to me than he did to any of the other group leaders. And that was an indication, I think, of the speech that was to come. I was astonished that he really did criticise the excess spending within the EU institutions and even hinted that the travelling circus from Brussels to Strasbourg and back every month was wrong. So I think the guy's got Eurosceptic form, and I was pleasantly surprised to see what he had to say. Now, you thought your boss was bad. Wait till you hear about this next man. Yep, the chief executive of a US-based digital mortgage lending company fired 900 people simultaneously on a Zoom call ahead of the holiday season. Here's a clip of him doing it.
If you're on this call, you are part of the unlucky group that is being laid off. Your employment here is terminated, effective immediately.
Kidding me?
What does this mean for what's next? You're going to get an email from HR, askhr@better.com, to your personal email address. Details of your severance and your benefits. For all U.S. employees, we're providing 4 weeks of severance.
Well, what a heartless, but no, we're before the watershed. Right, but there you are. As I say, he looks like the worst boss in the world. In a moment, the GB News pub is opening, and the black farmer, Wilfred Emmanuel-Jones, will be sitting here talking to me.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
As advertised by Jacob Rees-Mogg in the House of Commons yesterday, it is Talking Pints, and today I'm joined by Wilfred Emmanuel-Jones. Welcome to the GB News pub.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's
nice
great
to
see you. I just love your story.
Thank you.
I love your story. I wonder how it all happened. You know, the boy that's born in Jamaica and comes to the UK and lives in one of the big conurbations of Birmingham. And yet, lots of things you've done in between, lots of very interesting things you've done in between. We'll come back to that. Very nearly a member of Parliament, and it was a great shame you weren't, actually. How does somebody from that background suddenly become the rural Englishman, the farmer, the Morris dancer? What happened here? It's a fascinating story.
Well, actually, one of the great advantages of being brought up on society's dustbin heap is that there's nowhere else to go but up.
Right.
And as you said, look, I'm of the Windrush generation, so you know the story that people like my parents came over in the 50s. I was left behind, and then when they earned enough money, I then followed, and I was brought up in Small Heath in Birmingham. And even to this day, I have absolutely no fondness at all for the place. It was a pits.
Was it?
And I'm from a family of 11, so there's 11 of us. Imagine this now, Nigel, 11 of us brought up in a two-down-toast house. There are 3 of us to a bed. We were really, really poor. You know, I remember my mother having to try and feed 11 of us with 1 chicken. And it's not one of these chickens you now get at the supermarkets, which is nice and tender. It's one of these old hens that no one wanted, and so she had to cook it for days.
I shouldn't laugh.
But, you know, I've now to this day got a fetish with my chicken bones because trying to get every bit of nutrition out of it. But because we were so poor, my father had an allotment, and as the oldest boy, it was my responsibility to look after this allotment. And this is where my story started, because this allotment really became my oasis away from the misery that I was surrounded in. And I can remember at the age of 11 that I made myself a promise that one day I would like to own my own farm. Now, it took me about 40 years to achieve that. But one of the things I like to say to people, it's very, 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 very important to dream early and to dream big. Now, you've been to the States, and the Americans really understand this idea that you could dream to be much bigger.
Sky's the limit. Yeah.
Sky is the limit.
Yeah.
So if there's one criticism I have to have about us being British is that we tend to be quite cynical about people who think that they could really rise above their station. But if you don't put it out there, if you don't dream it, it will never, ever happen. And every single thing about everything I've achieved in life, somebody has gone out of their way to help me make it happen. So if you're not prepared to put it out there, you will not meet the guardian angels who will come along to help you achieve those goals. So that, it may be a very simple thing to say, but it's a very, very, very important thing.
I mean, this is the most pro-allotment argument I've ever heard in my life.
Very much so.
But I think actually allotments have been very popular during lockdown, and I think people have been growing things, and people have been enjoying the big outdoors.
But there's nothing better than knowing that you are responsible for making something happen, that you see it starting off as a little seed and you nurture it, you care for it, and then actually you produce something that is edible. That is really, really fascinating. One of the things I read about during COVID, a lot of people started buying plants, house plants, and they were starting to looking after these plants, nurturing. It is wonderful to be able to sort of nurture stuff because it takes you outside of yourself, really, and it helps you to connect with, there's this bigger thing than yourself. So I would advocate that all the time.
I'm harvesting my carrots at the moment.
Are you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't grow a lot, fairly modest, but, you know, do radishes and spring onions and a few tomatoes, and the carrots are looking good, and I, you know, it doesn't take much time, and I enjoy doing it. But interesting, I mean, you know, from that background, you know, parachute regiment, didn't kind of work out that well. But
now let's be honest, I got kicked out of the polish. I mean, I was a real pain in the arse. I mean, you got to try and picture this. I'm a 16-year-old boy, left school without any qualifications. One of the disadvantages that I had at that time was that I'm dyslexic.
Which wouldn't have been recognised.
Would not have been recognised. So it's something I'm pretty passionate about now because I think there's a lot of people whose lives are wasted where they could be doing a lot more if people understood dyslexia. So, you know, a 16-year-old black-mouthy guy going into something like the parachute regiment, one or two things are going to happen. You either do as you're told or you're going to get your head kicked in and get kicked out. I got my head kicked in, I got kicked out.
Yeah, and then television but
television was quite interesting.
And you did well with television.
We see what was interesting about television, and again, this is all about having the courage to have the audacity to dream big. Because at the time, there were some fantastic programmes on the BBC. And I decided, actually, I would like to go and work in television. So you can imagine all of my family and friends thought I was nuts. As you probably know, that television then and today is full of the Oxbridge types, especially
big
especially the traditional
BBC.
And exactly, so it was the BBC that I wanted to get. You know, so a black guy from my background. You know, how on earth did that happen? Now, you know, as you can imagine, I tried to write to people, ring people, no one took my calls. And at the time, in fact, because I was living in Birmingham, BBC Pebble Mill, I went to the security guards and said, because they used to have these manual barriers that used to let the big important people like you in and out of the building.
Get out.
And I said, could I help doing that? Because the security guards said yes, because they didn't want to get out of their nice, comfortable sheds. So I did that for months and months and months. I then met the cleaners, and I went to clean the offices. And I remember this guy, his name
Entryism, this is called. This is
pardon?
Entryism.
Entryism. But the big break was a guy, and his name was Jock Gallagher, who was a big senior executive at the BBC at the time. And I said, look, you know, I really want to get a job in television. And he says, look, you know, you ain't the sort of person we employ in television because you don't have the education, you got a bit of an attitude problem. But he said, I don't know, he said, if he'd lived to regret this, but I'll give you a job as a runner for 3 months and then to see what happened. Now, that man, having the courage to give me that break, then started up a long career in television. And not enough of that happens. And the thing I hate more than anything is bloody human resources. Sorry, can you swear?
No, not really. But that's like one strike.
One strike. Right. Human resources, because what they do is that they would filter out.
They dehumanise.
They filter out all the stuff unless you fit into a very narrow framework.
And you must have a degree. And
so many people are wasted who have got talents because our system just doesn't. It's not geared to see the differences that they have. So that's how my career in TV started. Really, people going out of the way to give.
You first came onto my radar. I don't know what it would have been. 2005, 6, 7. This very flamboyant black bloke riding a horse in the English countryside, who'd become a farmer, was supportive of country sports, and wanted to become a Conservative member of Parliament. I thought, what is going on here? But you were very flamboyant.
But it's all about breaking the stereotype. Because I'll tell you what my philosophy is, Nigel. You know, my parents have earned the right. Because what happens with a lot of the black community is that they feel as though that only the cities or the towns is the place where they could be. And I think it's part of our responsibility to branch out. If you want to work and live in rural Britain, you feel that's part of your soul, you have the right to do that. The great irony is this. A lot of people from where my parents came from are from rural backgrounds. You know, they left rural backgrounds and ended up in the cities, but actually they'd probably prefer to be in rural environments. but all the prejudice about what they expect they will find if they go to rural Britain. I can remember when I told people I was going to buy my farm down in Devon, people were saying to me, "Shit, you know, do they lynch black people down there? You know, this is the idea."
And yet, what did you find when you got there?
Well, there's two things that I found. I mean, the urbanites thought I was crazy. The rural people just thought it was nuts because anybody in rural Britain wanted to get out of rural Britain and go up country, as they call it, go up country. And that they just couldn't figure it out, you know. I'll give you, this is a really, really fascinating story. I can remember when I put up my first polytunnel, somebody called out the police because they thought it was a cover for me growing ganja. So when you're trying
that
to...
That is prejudice. I mean,
well, I mean, when you are trying to break stereotypes, when you're a pathfinder, it's confusing for people because it doesn't sort of fit what people imagine what a black person should be. You know, the greatest privileges in life is to be authentically who you want to be, rather than feeling that you have to belong or behave in a certain way.
So they called you the black farmer down in Devon?
Well, exactly. So, you know,
but that wasn't meant as an insult, was it?
No, it wasn't. I mean, I think everybody tries to find a way of easily sort of communicating, I am black, you know, I'm the only one there. It's an obvious thing to do. And what I've always done with my life is that, how do you use your difference as an advantage?
So you embraced it?
Well, I just thought that is a brilliant way, actually, to create a brand.
Yeah.
Because, and it was at the time, you know, in this society we live in, everybody's really a bit nervous about political correctness. What is the right thing to say? What you can and you can't say. So I knew that when I decided to call the brand The Black Farmer, a lot of people, especially from the left, would be thinking, whoa, you know, is that politically correct? You know, I would say, well, what do you want me to call myself? The Afro-Caribbean farmer? It doesn't have the same...
But it's worked for you beautifully, hasn't it?
Well, it is, because actually it says what it is on the tin.
Yeah.
And also, what it also points out is that there isn't black farmers in this country. And the question is, well, why aren't they? Considering a lot of them did come from rural backgrounds. And the truth of it is this, is that most private farms, the guys haven't had to go out and actually buy it. It's been handed down through the generations. And or you would be able to rent or lease land from these big landowners. So whether you're black or whether you're from any environment where you're an outsider, it's always
very difficult to break it.
Very
I think that's right.
Yeah,
I think
so
that's
it's
right.
about how do we create a system where we get new blood, because I think our industry desperately needs new blood.
I was very sorry. You came within a couple of thousand votes of being an MP.
God, yeah.
That was close, and you'd have made a real impact in Parliament. But it didn't happen.
No.
But your life's been a great success, and then leukemia strikes.
Yes, I mean, and I mean, I know it may be an odd thing to say, but the greatest gift I had was getting that cancer. And if you look at my face at the moment, you'll see that I've got something called graft versus host disease, which is something that, because I had the transplant, this is what sort of happens. So every day I look in the mirror, I know I'm here because of timing, because of science.
Yeah.
I should not have been here. So therefore, your perspective on life is totally different. So it's how do you live your authentic truth, rather than worrying about what people may think of you. And if there's one thing I could say to people is that do not allow yourself to get into a position where you nearly die before you start living your authentic truth.
On that deep philosophical note, I'm going to say, Wilfred Emmanuel-Jones, thank you for joining me on Talking Pies. We could have talked for hours, but he was great, wasn't he? He really was.
Thank you.
Well, we're coming towards the last few minutes of the show, but as ever, of course, it is time for Barrage the Farage, where you send in your questions, and I'll do my best to answer them, and Wilfred's staying with me, I might bring him in, because I haven't seen these before. Neil on Twitter asks me, Prince William likes AC/DC's Thunderstruck. What's your favourite song to headbang to? Are you a headbanger, Wilfred?
No, but I was watching a documentary the other night with, was it Phil Lynam, the guy from Thin Lizzy?
Yep.
I thought I could have banged away to his tunes. I thought, how on earth didn't I know his music when I was a young kid? I was really impressed with him.
Big Thin Lizzy endorsement. Headbanging, got to tell you, not for me. Michael asks, do you think it would be a good idea for the Reform and Reclaim parties to join forces and become one? The Conservative Party has moved so far to the centre, perhaps even so far to the left, that there is now room, once again on the centre-right. UKIP filled that gap very effectively. Thank goodness it did. It helped get us a referendum, which got us Brexit. Wilfred, you were a Brexiteer.
Definitely.
Definitely.
The best thing we ever did.
Full-on Brexiteer.
Best thing we ever did.
I think that for the centre-right to be split between two relatively new parties is something that needs to be addressed. I think somehow someone's got to put a bit of salt on Boris Johnson's tail. I really, really do. Dave on Twitter asks, when are you inviting Dominic Cummings onto Talking Pints? Do you know what? I've never got on with Dominic Cummings at all. I found him difficult in the extreme, but the point about Talking Pints is we sometimes get delightful guests, such as Wilfred, and we often get other guests that are quite punchy and difficult, but we get people with all ranges of opinions across the political spectrum, and if Dominic Cummings wants to come on Talking Pints, and as I say, Jacob Rees-Mogg did endorse this segment of the programme from the dispatch box yesterday. Dominic, you want to come on Talking Pints? Come on. If you want to have a punch-up, that's fine. You're welcome. Right, I've got time for one or two more quick ones. One viewer on Twitter asks, would you ever admit you were wrong about anything? Yes, I've often admitted I've been wrong about many, many things. My life has been strewn with ridiculous, catastrophic errors. The thing is, do we learn from our mistakes, Wilfred?
I tell you what, this is one of my favourite sayings. You only know if you're living by the mistakes you make. You know, every day you've got to be able to say, I made a mistake. Now, the key thing is that you've got to learn from that. But if you think life is about not making mistakes, you're slumming.
Away with the birds. Absolutely. And we're going to end on a very serious note, but a very important note. 80 years ago today, the Japanese Imperial Forces attacked Pearl Harbor. There were 300,000 Americans in and around the Pearl Harbor basin at the time. 2,400 of them were killed in those air raids. Today, 80 years on, there are only 38 of those 300,000 left. The World War II generation, you know, they really are passing away. And I thought it's worth remembering Pearl Harbor and looking at some of this footage, because it was because of Pearl Harbor, of course, that the United States finally entered the war. And if the United States had not entered the war, there would have been no D-Day, there would have been no Normandy, there would have been no defeat of Nazi Germany. And we wouldn't enjoy our rights of democracy and free speech that we do today, which is why we got to hang on to those rights of free speech and fight against anybody from the cancel culture left. That's it from me today. Over to Colin Brazier. First, the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. The worst of Storm Barra's weather is now easing, but the weather stays unsettled during the next 24 hours with further rain or showers and continued gusty winds in many places. You can see Storm Barra, a dartboard area of low pressure, which deepened rapidly as it made its way across the Atlantic on Monday and the start of Tuesday, now slowing down and gradually filling, so the worst of its impacts will come down in the next 24 hours, but still the potential for some very unsettled weather overnight. Through the evening, 70 to 80 mile per hour wind gusts possible for parts of Wales and to the Bristol Channel as well. Stays windy in the northeast as well, and showers wrapped around that area of low pressure, or longer spells of rain with further hill snow for northern England as well as Scotland. So we start off Wednesday very unsettled with that low still in place. The winds will be coming down through the day, but it's going to take a while, so still the potential for gales for South Wales and southwest England, 65 mile per hour wind gusts. And for northeast Scotland, Northern Ireland, parts of western England and Wales, a continuous feed of showers through the day. The weather stays unsettled in many spots. Some drier and brighter interludes towards the east of England, western Scotland, for example. However, all in all, it's an unsettled day. Expect showers, expect gusty winds, and it will feel cool or cold with all of that weather going on. Into Wednesday evening and overnight, we're going to see further showers coming in from that area of low pressure, especially in the east and northeast, and a few coming through to western England, Wales and north.